Hey guys, it's Rift here. How are you all doing today? I'm doing pretty well, because today we're kinda bringing my channel full circle by taking a look at an old topic resurfaced, that being, was Peter Parker nerfed in Spider-Man 2? A video by That Boy Aqua. Let's get started.
So I want to take some time to look over Peter's performance over the first and second game and see if he really was nerfed, and more importantly, how. I think there are three ways to analyze how and why Peter might have been nerfed. There's the narrative sense, which is how often he justifiably loses, and then we can look at how Peter is thematically nerfed, looking at how he operates in the context of other characters, and finally, the time sense, where we can view how much Peter is nerfed in the context of screen time. For the sake of this video, we'll refer to Spider-Man purely in terms of Peter Parker's heroic persona, and we will only refer to Miles by the name Miles.
I basically just skipped over the introduction to his video, since the first minute and a half or so is basically just him going over the context behind the video, as well as the methods and metrics that he is using to determine whether Peter is nerfed. Let's actually skip to his points.
When I began researching for this video, my first step was to replay the game and look at all the times Peter loses. I then tried to categorize how he lost and if it was justified. A justifiable loss is considered as a moment where he does not feel, in the moment, nerfed as a means of giving the story stakes. For example, when he loses to the Sinister Six, that's totally justifiable. He's surrounded, taking a 1v5, and while he holds his own for a bit, it makes perfect sense that he loses here.
Friendly reminder that this was not the Sinister Six. He lost to 5 supervillains before Doc Ock even showed up. I can't believe people still hold this misconception even to this day. Count the fucking villains. Vulture, Scorpion, Mr. Negative, Electro, Rhino. That's 5 villains. Peter never fought the Sinister Six in this game.
An unjustified loss is when in the burning building with May. Peter's strength is suddenly so weak that he virtually passes out as he falls into a burning building where, had Miles not caught him, he would have been burned alive. This to me is an unjustified loss, where his strength, dexterity, and durability have been altered to give a moment stakes and push the idea that Spider-Man needs to rely on his friends.
I agree that Peter was nerfed in the burning building, and the reason for this is because later on in the same evening, we see that not only does Peter have the stamina to go after Octavius, but he also has the speed, stamina, and strength to endure a battle with Electro and Vulture after they had gotten significantly upgraded from Otto Octavius. Sure, he passed out after the fight with those villains, but I feel like he was nerfed in the burning building, since those two examples took place the same evening. Then again, this took place in Act 3, where Peter has 14 broken bones, so there is an in-universe explanation, at least, as to why he's performing not at his best.
This is a common issue we see in plenty of superhero stories, and when it comes to Spider-Man, the biggest barrel of fish you can open is the spider sense. The moment you introduce his ability to sense and react to danger that he can't directly see, we open all kinds of possibilities for Peter to just have his senses nerfed because the villain needs to get the drop on him. I don't think this narrative issue is a big deal if it's done sparingly, and as long as it isn't too egregious. For example, when Otto defeats Peter with relative ease in their first encounter, he is able to, quite quickly, turn around and face him again, except this time defeat him, despite already being weakened.
Whilst I agree that this Spider-Man has had instances where he has taken an L to a villain, only to then win round 2, that's not the case with Doc Ock, since we see in the game, he engineers a specific suit of armor called the Anti-Ock suit in order to fight Doc Ock, and even then, he only barely wins.
Where it becomes egregious is when he's shown to be defeated by unjustified reasons. To look at another example, we can see that Peter is able to take down both Rhino and Scorpion at the same time in the first game. However, in Miles Morales, Peter is soloed by Rhino to the point where, had Miles not been there, he would have died. Now, they do this so that Miles has a reason to step up and be pushed enough to unlock his Venom powers, but it makes no sense that Peter would be so easily battered by the Rhino like this.
This is a misconception that a lot of people have had for a while, and I'll do my best to break it down. Peter in the PS4 game, despite being weakened, actually has a home field advantage against Rhino and Scorpion for 2 reasons. Number 1, they suck at working together as a team and were getting in each other's way, which led to Peter getting the advantage. And number 2, the area that they fought was completely isolated, and it also played to Peter's strengths, allowing him to escape Rhino pretty easily and exploit his agility to deal with Scorpion. Rhino and Scorpion are so shit at working together as a team that it's debatable as to whether Peter won that fight at all, since they basically just turned on each other and won the fight for Peter. However, in the Miles Morales game, Peter is put at a significant disadvantage. Unlike in the PS4 game where they fought in an abandoned area, that's not the case anymore. Rhino is charging through not only buildings that are heavily populated, but also the streets of New York, and as a result, Peter has a lot more to worry about. Not only does he have to minimize collateral damage and prevent civilian casualties, but he also has to worry about Miles being an inexperienced superhero, whilst also protecting himself, whilst also taking down Rhino. This is less a case of Peter being nerfed and more a case of Rhino getting lucky. Not to mention, Peter in the PS4 game concedes that Rhino is stronger than him, meaning that taking an L to Rhino isn't out of the realm of possibilities, especially since Peter fought for a long ass time in the Miles Morales game before eventually being knocked out.
So with that in mind, let's look at all the ways Peter loses in the first game. The first instance of Peter losing is when he is knocked out at City Hall. This is a perfectly justifiable way for him to lose. He wasn't prepared, did what he could, and ultimately wouldn't have been able to stop the bombing anyways.
It's funny because I actually disagree with this. I think that Peter was nerfed in City Hall. I think it's stupid that Spider-Man would get knocked out by an explosion, but MJ and Miles Morales, whilst sustaining flesh wounds, are completely fine and don't get knocked out. If anything, I think Peter was nerfed in this example.
Another is when first coming face to face with Lee, where Spider-Man is pinned under a server rack after taking a direct blow. He didn't know about Lee's powers or how they worked, and the server rack was probably pretty heavy. I'd say justified.
Once again, I call bullshit, and I do think Peter was nerfed in this scene. This is basically the fridge scene of Marvel's Spider-Man PS4. Peter literally entered the room seeing that Martin Lee had a hostage, and Peter should be doing anything he can to save said hostage. Instead, he abandons the high ground and just slowly walks towards Mr. Negative, which leads to him getting cheap-shotted, which I don't think should do as much damage to Peter as the game seems to imply. And we see consistently throughout the story that Peter can beat Mr. Negative even in an enclosed environment, and even with 14 broken bones, he fought the strongest version of Mr. Negative later on in the game and came out on top. I don't buy the argument either that Peter just underestimated Negative, since as I said, there was a hostage in the room and Peter knew this. That was the entire point of the Halloween mission. And whilst Mr. Negative's power has been shown in the game to be effective against Spider-Man, I don't buy the argument that he would be pinned under these terminals for a long ass time when he can lift several tons of concrete. This sequence makes Peter seem very incompetent just so Mr. Negative can learn the information that he needs to know.
When Sable shows up, she traps Peter and he can't break out, even though he does that plenty in gameplay. I would say this is pretty unjustified and is done to make Sable seem like a threat. He also loses to her again later in the game.
I think counting this example as a loss is pretty unfair. Number one, because Peter didn't want to fight Sable in either instance. He consistently wants to work with her throughout the game. All this scene demonstrates is that a character flaw of Peter is that he sometimes underestimates human characters, but it also demonstrates just how dangerous Sable can be. And even then, Peter only looked momentarily phased from her kick. By this logic, Peter also took an L to human Miles Morales because Miles got a decent punch in. Or he took a massive L to Vulture when Vulture tied him up in the cables and dragged him through the streets of New York, even though Peter would then go on to 1v2 not only Vulture but also Electro and come out on top. Even in the Silver Lining DLC, when Silver Sable returns and she is mercilessly hunting down Hammerhead at all costs, Peter still holds back and still wants to work with her. Friendly reminder that Peter in a cloth suit was able to take down Kingpin. I'm fairly certain Silver Sable in the new armored advanced suit would be light work for the guy if he actually wanted to beat her.
In total, Peter loses about 8 times throughout the story, and 5 of those times it is justified, leaving 3 instances where I believe Peter's power was capped in order to build up the story's antagonist.
It's actually pretty interesting that you came to the conclusion of 5 justified and 3 unjustified, because that's also what I think, though we have different opinions. I believe that the Sinister 5, Scorpion, Doc Ock, and both Sable encounters are justified, as there's context surrounding them. However, as I've gone over earlier, I think that City Hall, the Mr. Negative encounter, and the Burning Building encounter are all unjustified losses for Peter, and come across as his power being nerfed just for the plot to happen.
I'd say this is a very forgivable amount. We can see again that he loses to Rhino and Miles Morales, and while I won't count this game because Peter is hardly in it, I want to examine this scene because it highlights a big part of the problem, which is Insomniac will sometimes not remember that Peter needs to lose for a reason. If he lost to Rhino because Miles interfered and accidentally sabotaged him, then it wouldn't feel like Peter is just being nerfed to fit the narrative.
Miles literally did sabotage Peter in this instance. Fuck, Miles was the reason Rhino even escaped to begin with. Roll the clip.
Pull back, Miles. Let me take... I got this, Pete. Don't worry. Miles, no! It's secure.
You're drifting Helix 2. We have a weight imbalance. Correction 236. Rudder's unresponsive. Brace for impact. Helix 2 going down. Helix 2 is going down. Brace, brace, brace! Helix 2 is down. No casualties. Payload compromised.
Anyways, let's move on to Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 introduces a bit of a problem with our current methodology, which is that sometimes Peter can technically lose and win at the same time. And this comes up in the game's very introduction. When fighting Sandman, Peter falls into some sand and has technically lost. He is saved by Miles, and without Miles, would have presumably suffocated. However, later in the fight, they win because Peter devises a plan using Miles' electricity, so he technically wins there, as without him, Miles would have lost. Again, in both cases, these scenes are written to highlight the benefit of having two heroes. In these niche cases, we will count it as both a win and a loss and keep it neutral.
I think the biggest issue with the Sandman fight is how incompetent both Spider-Men seem to be. Like, in terms of power, I don't think they're nerfed, it's more so just how silly Peter acts in this fight. Like, at the very start of the battle, Peter latches onto Marco's face, and Marco very quickly punishes Peter for trying that shit. That should be the end of it. You should, from that point forward, continue abusing his weaknesses to not only Miles' electricity, but also the large bodies of water that you keep using. However, Peter tries again, not once but twice, to physically punch Sandman in the face as if it would do literally anything.
The next time we see Peter lose is at the amusement park, where he nearly fails to save a roller coaster of civilians before Harry shows up to save the day. Peter has lifted much heavier, so again, this is done to make Harry's entrance more dramatic.
Once again, I agree, Peter should not be struggling to lift these cars, especially given what he does later on in the scene. Roll the clip.
Was that?
Yeah!
The next scene is one I'm conflicted on, and of course, it's where Peter is stabbed. Peter needs to lose to Kraven so the narrative that he needs the suit can continue. But in this case, it would have been nice to see him put up more of a fight. I want to leave the scene neutral, because I don't think he was nerfed in this scene, but less so, hardly allowed to participate.
This scene definitely has problems, but I don't think it has anything to do with Peter being nerfed. I don't dislike the idea of Kraven killing Spider-Man. This is the same guy who bodied Scorpion, blitzed Black Suit Spider-Man, held his own against Symbiote Spider-Man, and even briefly went toe-to-toe with Venom later on in the game. Him killing Peter makes perfect sense, especially since the blade he stabs Spider-Man with is clearly no normal knife, as red gas emits from the blade after he stabs Peter, suggesting that there is a neurotoxin within the blade, which actually makes sense given the symptoms that Peter sustains immediately after being stabbed.
This feels not great. MJ, I don't think... Am I breathing? I can't see.
I think the bigger problem with this scene is that it damages Kraven's character. If he has limited time to live and his entire focus is dying by the hands of a worthy adversary, then why would he effortlessly kill and toss away Peter's Spider-Man, the same guy who beat basically every villain that he was tracking down? From Kraven's perspective, Peter's Spider-Man would be the apex predator of New York, yet he just kills him and tosses him away effortlessly. It damages Kraven's character, and I think that's the problem with this scene.
Similar sentiment to the church scene. Sure, Kraven does initially get one over by ringing the bell, but Peter does destroy it, so if there was to be a fight, Kraven would have likely gotten his shit rocked. Regardless, not counting it as a victory and leaving it neutral. The next time we see Peter lose is when we lose the symbiote suit. Once he has the suit, he goes on a tear through the rogues gallery and doesn't lose.
Peter might not lose against any supervillains with the black suit, but he does have moments of incompetency nonetheless, such as when he's swinging to the church, his spider sense goes off and he still gets hit, and when he sits idly like a dumbass and gets hit a second time by the same guy. The one example I'm willing to give a slight pass to is when he makes the honey joke to that one guy, but at the same time he should still have dodged the incoming attack. Especially when you factor in the context that hunters are at EMF, something that is very close to Peter's heart. He should want the hunters gone as soon as possible, especially since Harry could also be in danger since he is at EMF and he no longer has the symbiote.
But he does lose to Miles. I love this scene and I love this fight, but again, Kraven is the strongest villain the two have faced, and Peter needed the symbiote to win, and Miles just beat the symbiote, so what does that imply? Either way, Peter is ultimately the one to take the suit off, and it's a justified loss, so let's put a pin in that for now because Peter loses once again against Venom. He's thrown through a wall and is knocked out for the entire night. I consider this, even if it is a minor infraction, an unjustified loss, and it's done so we can have the coolest level in the game. I wish the game justified it by claiming that after taking off the suit, the fatigue caught up with him all at once, but we don't really get that, so unjustified.
To the game's credit, that by Aqua is incorrect here. The game does at the very least try to give a reason as to why Peter performs so terribly after taking off the black suit.
Spider-Man, how are you feeling?
Anxious? Panicked?
I meant, physical symptoms. Soreness? Fatigue?
Yes. Wait, symptoms?
I've been looking through years of research notes. The symbiote channels a collective consciousness.
That hive mind I was in.
Is optimistic. May still be inside you.
What?
Nothing to panic about, but perhaps you should come to the lab for some tests.
Can't, Doc. Bigger problems. Gotta go.
We're gonna skip slightly ahead because he goes on a massive tangent about the fridge scene, which, yeah, I agree it's pretty terrible in retrospect. Granted, the game does give a reason as to why he performs as badly as he does, but even so, I still think it's unjustifiable. I think that the scene is easily fixable. Like, Venom could grab Peter with one hand and then infect Mary Jane with the other. I think that would fix the scene entirely. However, that's not the scene we got, and as a result, it makes Peter look even more incompetent.
Boss is at City Hall, and it's once again due to the general incompetence on the part of both Spider-Men. Peter puts up hardly any fight against the infected, and conveniently has no sound gadgets, which are canon as they were developed as part of a different earlier mission. Then Miles jumps in, and instead of using electricity, or anything really, he just tugs on him a bunch. Now, granted, we can see multiple tendrils begin to pin Peter down as soon as he hits the ground, so it's hard to call this entirely unjustified, so we can simply leave it as neutral, as once again, it's to make Mr. Negative the hero.
Not to be that guy, but how the fuck is this a neutral? Both Peter and Miles were clearly nerfed in this example, since Miles doesn't use his bioelectricity, and Peter doesn't do literally anything. How is this anything other than a nerf for both characters?
Peter in his final encounter has the effects of Anti-Venom change moment to moment. Now, this makes some sense from a writing perspective because Anti-Venom is the most blatant plot device ever, but especially in the case of when Venom defeats him after his second phase, he hardly resists him. What could he do to escape? Maybe the thing he did not even a minute ago when he was in the exact same situation. Again, this could easily be changed to have Venom stop the fight midway because he senses that the meteorite is gone, and Peter can struggle to keep up with him because he just flies away. Unjustified loss. Also, we know Anti-Venom is strong enough to do this, so it feels like the capabilities of Anti-Venom are all over the place.
I completely agree with this 100%. I think it's very difficult to take Anti-Venom seriously when it gets buffed and nerfed whenever it's convenient for the plot. And even if you want to discount the fodder symbiotes and only look at Venom specifically, Anti-Venom is very inconsistent even against him. Let's take a look at all of the times Peter uses Anti-Venom against Venom. You'll see that it's like a completely different suit.
Here's the thing, though.
What's happening?
Fight, Harry! Fight!
I can't. I'm done. You have to. You have to kill us.
Harry! Please!
Our final total is 7 unjustified losses and 2 justified losses.
The only one that I disagree with is the Kraven one, since I do think it is at the very least plausible for Kraven to kill Spider-Man. I just think the way that he did it comes at the cost of Kraven's character. On paper at least, Peter loses a lot more in Spider-Man 2 than he did in Spider-Man 1. But we're not done with the end of the video, because if you look at Miles Morales, you'll see that he actually gets a very similar treatment.
More interesting, however, is how and when Miles loses. Miles is a total newbie in this game, which makes a lot of his incompetence justified. Mostly. He loses to Finn after chasing her, and this is a weird loss because while he could melt her tools with his electricity, as showcased on the bridge, he might be hesitant because that's his friend. Then he justifiably loses to Rhino because he is ambushed, outnumbered, and he has new armor that negates his electricity powers. Then he loses to Finn again in the subway tunnel, though he's not really putting up a fight, instead trying to reason with her. And that's it. Miles doesn't lose often, and 2 out of the 3 times he does, you can make a reasonable argument that he wasn't even trying to win. Spider-Man 2 is a different story. Miles would have been eaten by Sandman, but is saved by Peter, much in the same way Peter saved him. Miles loses instantly to Scorpion, much in the same way that Peter did in the first game. You could say Miles fails to catch Lee in this scene, but it was a joint effort and Peter made the call to let him go, so I don't count this one. He loses when captured by the Hunters, and I think this is pretty justified.
I don't think this scene is justified at all. We see his spider sense go off and he still gets hit by a regular human being.
He loses when trying to save Peter in possibly the greatest display of incompetence, and finally, he loses to Venom, or would have lost if he wasn't saved by MJ. So he loses 5 times, and only once is it justified.
I'd argue it's the opposite. I think Miles has a ton of unjustifiable losses in this game. More so than Peter when you think about it, because at the very least Peter has quite a lot of W's, but Miles really doesn't have that in Spider-Man 2. The only character he actually beats is Mr. Negative on his own. Outside of that, his wins are either circumstantial, such as against Symbiote Spider-Man, or is a joint effort with Peter, such as Sandman and Venom.
He still loses less than Peter, but he doesn't have as much screen time. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, I'd say Insomniac didn't necessarily nerf Peter, they nerfed the writers.
Despite that phrasing being very weird and debatably cringeworthy, it actually raises an interesting question. Was Peter nerfed, or was everyone nerfed? Because as we've gone over already, Peter and Miles struggled way less in their debut games, and that was Miles' origin story, keep in mind. Yet all of a sudden in Spider-Man 2, both Peter and Miles have many moments of incompetency that make them look categorically weaker. Now, if we're being honest with ourselves, from a lore perspective and from a power scaling perspective, Miles and Peter got objectively stronger in Spider-Man 2, or at the very least they were supposed to have. Miles has more refined and potent Venom powers, both Spider-Men have the web wings, Peter has the spider arms, and as of right now at least, he has the Anti-Venom abilities, making him stronger in all categories as well as giving him a healing factor as well as the symbiote tendrils. In all honesty, I do believe that it was intentional from the writers of Insomniac to make these characters more powerful than ever. However, at the same time, I wouldn't fault you for saying that either one of these characters was nerfed because of how they are portrayed in the game. They lose fights that they realistically shouldn't, and they're portrayed to be incompetent in areas that they should have learned from already. Peter Parker was not nerfed in Spider-Man 2. I think that it's worse than that. I think that to an extent you can argue that every character was nerfed in this game. Even if these characters are more powerful than ever on paper, they have moments of incompetency that contradict that and make it feel as though the characters are regressing rather than growing mentally in accordance with their new powers and abilities. And this is something that I hope no longer plagues the writing for Peter or Miles in the upcoming Marvel Spider-Man 3. I'm the Gaming Rift, I thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like it and subscribe to the channel, and consider showing some love to that boy Aqua, as he makes some pretty interesting videos on the Arkham Batman series, as well as the Insomniac games. And if you want more videos like this, consider letting me know in the comments section, and if you want to discuss the topic with me, you can join the Discord server, links are in the description. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.